The constitutive law of the National Gender and Equality Commission mandates the Commission to investigate on its own initiative or on the basis of complaints any matter of violations of the principles of equality and freedom from discrimination and make recommendations thereof. It is on this premise that the National Gender and Equality Commission conducted a public inquiry on child pregnancies in Kenya. The objective was to establish the magnitude of child pregnancies in Kenya and make appropriate recommendations for managing the situation both at the national and county government levels.
We needed to look at the legal framework because from our Keeping the Promise campaign, we realized that Kenya has very many legislations around promotion and protection of sexual violence. So we needed to find out to what extent the law protects the child, and especially the girl child.
The inquiry focused on 6 counties sampled across the country based on prevalence rates of child pregnancy. Samburu, where clan-based Moranism, beading and other harmful traditions on underage girls drives child pregnancy. Kwale, where poverty and tourism is highly correlated to child prostitution and promotes child pregnancy. Nakuru, where a migrant and agricultural labor force is associated with surge in child pregnancy. Busia, where a permissive culture contributes to child pregnancy. Homa Bay, where fishing is commonly associated with rise in child pregnancy. And finally, Nairobi, where urban lifestyle is linked to an increase in child pregnancy.
If you check the papers on a daily basis, a young girl has been raped. A school that had almost 14 girls getting pregnant in standard 6, 7, and 8 at a go. So, I mean, the violations we thought were great, and we thought we needed to inquire into the issues.
A total of 774 child witnesses were interviewed and shared their personal experiences with pregnancy and sexual encounter. Government officials at national and county levels with greatest responsibility of protecting children were interviewed and included the police, judiciary, Directorate of Public Prosecutions, Ministry of Education, persons in charge of health facilities, and the Teachers Service Commission. Their opinions were corroborated with those from parents, teachers, religious leaders, community-based organizations, and non-state actors. Public or in-camera hearing sessions were conducted in each of the counties and a National Experts Hearing Forum conducted in Nairobi. Cases of defilement, cultural practices such as female genital mutilation or cutting, disco matanga, wife replacement, Moranism, incest, lack of knowledge in sexual reproductive health, poor parenting, exposure to pornography, and poverty were revealed as key drivers of pregnancy in children.
You have incidences where adult members of the society are actually violating, sexually violating the young people, When you have fathers and the older members of society sexually harassing or sexually molesting young people, it also means that we have changed our norms in society. What we held dear, that a child was to be helped to develop and grow, then it doesn't seem to be working, because why somebody, including a father, should see a young girl and think of them in terms of sexuality also beats reason.
In Kwale County, for instance, the commission was treated to heart-wrenching stories of girls being defiled by their own fathers. Here, this girl narrates how her father repeatedly defiled her while invoking cultural traditions, ostensibly meant to protect her from evil spirits.
Watu wakija hapo kama watu wakija wafanya hivyo simokwenda kulala nao. Anasema ndivyo hivyo na baba mstaki. Anasema lazima akanipakia dawa yake hapa kwenye ulimi, katikati ya ulimi. Hapo nilikuwa siwezi kwenye ulimi kusema niongee, wala nilikuwa siwezi ulimi nzito. akili kama imechanganyika pale, kwa ni sijui sasa. Baba kalala na mimi, kutoka hapo paka dawa ya hapa kwenye kifua. Ananiambia sasa nenda zako.
This incident and many others left the girls in shock and psychological trauma.
The medical and psychological effects were very notable. What I noticed, what we saw is that all these children had sexual acts before they got pregnant. And these sexual acts occurred in the context of human rights violation, which means that a majority of these children either they had to be forced in child marriage, they were raped, or they had to be coerced to have sex for money and different reasons. So even that sexual act itself in most of these children has contributed to psychological problem and trauma. We saw many children who are depressed, many children who are suicidal, many children who are crying and desperate to leave. For example, we saw child prostitutes who they had no choice because they didn't have a source of income.
In Homa Bay County, girls as young as 13 are lured by fishermen to engage in sex for a pittance. One girl confessed the first time she gave in to a man was after she was handed a 50 shillings note, which is equivalent to $50, an amount she said was beyond her imagination.
Was there any time he gave you money without sex?
No.
Okay. The highest amount he gave you was how much?
150.
The highest?
Yes.
The lowest?
50.
50. What did you use the money for?
The money he was giving me is what for, if I can buy even pads, I can buy with them pads, clothes.
And it would appear young girls below the age of consent willingly give in to sex and use it as an incentive.
In the traditional sense, the child belonged to the entire community and that everybody was responsible for the behavior of the child. At the moment, I think there's a lot of individualism, spearheaded by the thinking of nucleated families and very minimal consideration of the extended familism. Also, there's lack of the grandparental role, which was very critical in molding the child, more particularly the girl child. The grandmother institution is sort of like dying. Either people are dead or people are not living in the communal sense, as it were. However, there are also a lot of other changes that have taken place, and this has to do with the degree of permissivity in society. There's a lot of permissiveness in which then sex is a very critical aspect of this.
A number of girls confessed that sex trade is the only means of survival. Many girls indicated that they had migrated from as far as Western Kenya, other parts of South Rift and Samburu to get clients in the sex transactions. The confession of a 17-year-old girl and a mother to a 3-year-old son captures the essence of the teenager's predicament.
Do they allow you to use protection? Because sometimes we are told they do not want you to use protection.
Yeah, most of them, but others want to.
So do you carry the condoms yourself or the men have the condoms? Where you don't carry? You don't think it's safer for you to also carry?
Sana wao tunakwambia mimi nishakipanga.
Anakwambia amejipanga. Na kuna wakati mwingine anakwambia hivyo unaenda unapata hajajipanga. Unaweza kataa, can you say no?
So unakuta uwezi ukikataa utakuwa umekusta story pesa. Pengine nyumbani hamjakula nini, sasa nilo mstruggle wao naangalia wao kwenye situation hivyo. Wengine watu wamependa kwa asubuhi wametoka hivyo. Sina pili tu kubali tu ili mradi ndio tukapo kwa chao.
Most clients do not prefer to use condoms, and this exposes the girls to high risks and unwanted pregnancies. Cultural practices such as both male and female circumcision were seen to expose both the girls and boys to premarital sex and hence the possibilities of child pregnancies and child marriages. Disco Matanga, a situation whereby community members, including adolescents, congregate at the home of the deceased for several days, accompanied by music and dancing, especially among the Luos and Luyas, was seen to encourage inappropriate sex practices, that have led to child pregnancies.
When we were going around the country, quite a number of girls did not have a clear link between their menses and pregnancy and what they were taught in school. Secondly, the religious leaders believe that the kids should not have sex and should not get pregnant. But the reality is different. These kids are getting pregnant. We hear they are being excommunicated from churches. They are becoming excommunicated from their own families. The men or the boys who make them pregnant deny them. There's total denial. They become outcasts in reality. So what's the middle ground? I think it would be important that we have age-specific sex education. The churches must be more open, more realistic, and respond to the needs of these kids, because I think they're letting the kids down.
The situation in Samburu County was particularly unsettling as the inquiry learnt of girls as young as 9 years old being taken through genital mutilation and immediately being whisked away for marriage to older men, some the age of their grandfathers.
The relationship of child pregnancies and female genital mutilation are twin epidemics for the girls in Samburu, because the culture gives you consent. After being circumcised, no one can stop you from having any relationship, and you're still very young. You are also either married off, or the Morans have a right of way to have you as a partner.
The practice of beading, which allows young Samburu men known as Morans to engage in non-marital sexual relationships with young Samburu girls who, according to the existing Kenyan law, are underage and thus not eligible for marriage, serves as a catalyst to child pregnancies and a major contributor to severe reproductive health complications in a community where the law is subordinate to culture. Beaded Samburu girls must undergo female genital cutting and marriage for a bride price at any age decided by the parents, especially fathers and uncles.
This is what the culture dictates, that when somebody has been cut, they cannot stay in the same house with their mother. And so that is why a young child as young as 9 or 8, when they are cut, they have to go, even if it means going to heal. They are taken to actually go and heal at their mother-in-law-to-be.
Patriarchy also leads to the culture in which women and girls are obsessed with marriage. It is as if the life of a woman is only complete when she is anchored to a man. Young girls look forward to their marriages, hoping that it is a rosy life. However, once they are in the marriages, they realize that it is not as per their expectations.
Sasa ukapata uko na mimba, ulimwelezea? Akasema nini? Alikubali, alikataa?
Alikubali.
Akasema nini?
Akasema tuende tuishi.
Muishi pamoja? Ulienda? Mama yako alikubali?
This in essence means that most of them get in and out of marriages within a short span of time.
Alafu ikawa aje?
Alafu akaanza kunitesa.
Kukutesa? Na njia gani?
Ala kunipiga.
If you look at those girls, do they even know in terms of knowledge of the existence of any law? To them, they know they got pregnant, they know they were married off, they were circumcised after FGM, and therefore that's their lives. Because the woman's life is limited between birth, marriage, and probably death. So that kind of situations require extreme awareness creation, not only on the children, but also on the duty bearers. The right holders and duty bearers must be able to understand and come to terms with the fact that the girl child is under threat, and that this threat is caused by this and this.
Lack of knowledge on sexual reproductive health, for example, the Kipsigis community was reportedly conservative on matters of sexuality and sexual education. Key informants observed that the community does not entertain the notion of parental dialogue with their daughters and sons on matters of reproductive health. This leaves the young girls on their own to experiment with their own sexuality, which in most cases results to child pregnancies.
And one of them told us, put your cell phone on, just key in the word sex, and everything will come out. So Do we want to continue burying our heads in the sand? Maybe not. How do we package an age-appropriate sex education to take to the schools? Because our children are perishing for want of information. And this information, neither ourselves as parents are giving it at home. We have said no to a curriculum. Teachers cannot teach.
In Nairobi, the influence of the media has led a number of girls astray. The lack of role models, presence of many entertainment joints, and the casual relationships with which the urban dwellers engage in has led many girls to experiment with their sexuality to their disadvantage.
That issue of consenting children, if you can put it that way, must be seen for what it is. It's a rotting society where we are losing the issue of what are your responsibilities, what are your roles as children, what are your roles as adults, young adults, what are your roles as parents. Because if your roles as a child, your key role as a child is to be in school and to pursue your development that way, then there is no issue of you trying to diverge into starting families.
From the medical perspective, the inquiry elicited several findings, including high levels of maternal mortality, unsafe abortions, and cultural practices like female genital mutilation, leading to medical complications and lack of gender-based violence recovery centers and counseling centers. Indeed, a considerable number of the girls interviewed exhibited depression and suicidal thoughts.
Unfortunately, the responses were not adequate. They were there, but they were not adequate. For the main reason is that there were no child-friendly or adolescent-friendly facilities to be able to handle them, provide medical care, provide psychological care, provide mental health care, especially for those who are depressed. So we found that there was a huge gap in that area.
There exists policy and legal frameworks, but in varying degrees of effectiveness, and in some cases, implementation totally lacking. The re-entry policy for girls who have become pregnant while in school, for instance, needs to be relooked at in tandem with the existing realities on the ground to ensure effective implementation. The law in some instances appears to be discriminating the boy child in terms of consensual sex between children. Homa Bay County, however, stood out as a shining example where collaboration between school authorities, parents, and the community allow pregnant girls to resume studies after giving birth, thus assuring them of continued education.
One case in Busia, the young girl, 13-year-old, came. The boy had been arrested, and she said, I lured the boy into the sexual act. He is my friend, he is my boyfriend, we have had sex many times. Now, this is a girl who will not appear in court to testify, or who will come to testify under pressure because you as a parent have said, go and testify against boy X. So we need to begin to think about how do we have a balanced law, a law that will educate both boys and girls to have a relationship, to know that they shouldn't engage in sexual acts until they're adults.
The inquiry also established the challenges that the criminal justice system has in mitigating child pregnancies. In sampled areas, there were several cases under investigation by the police and others before the courts for determination. The concern, however, was and continues to be the very slow success rate in securing convictions for the perpetrators. Most of the girls interviewed during the inquiry had been pregnant, illustrating obvious cases of defilement, yet majority, if not all, of the individuals responsible had not been brought to book. In Busia, for instance, where majority of the cases the office of the DPP was handling were on defilement, the officers admitted that the investigations by their counterparts in police were substandard, and as a result, majority of the prosecutions were unsuccessful.
We found police are very, very relaxed in terms of effecting the arrest. And for sexual offenses, preservation of the evidence is very important. You get to go to the police after 24 hours and there will be no evidence to be secured. We then came to the issues around the government chemist. The government chemist is still quite centralized. They are in Nairobi, they are in Nakuru, they are in Mombasa. Yet these are the people who are supposed to do forensic.